This is an update on where I'm at with some of these projects. This is a pile of Riley parts, Riley gearbox parts. I did have some good news and then some bad news. My parts I ordered from the Riley spares arrived, but they got stopped by customs who opened up the package. This is their tape there, which was fine. I expected that, and I expected to pay duty on it. There's no problem there. This is my box full of gaskets. Whoops, I'm just losing one. Clutch springs, thrust release bearing, spigot bearing, gearbox mounting rubbers. These are actually very useful because this now gives me the positioning of where that hole for the gearbox mount goes, because you can see these are offset. Engine mounting rubber cones, various nuts and bolts, clutch springs, and a kingpin repair kit. Now this is where the problem started, and you may be able to see what that is here. Obviously this is for both ends of the axle, so it's a set of parts, and there should be two kingpins in there. Instead, what I ended up with was one kingpin and one piece of packaging. No kingpin in there. So I contacted customs because they were the ones who had opened it, and they did a little investigation and they decided, oh, it was there when they opened it, and you know, it's not their problem. I can prove that the part was there when the box was sent because the weight is recorded on the box. I think it's on the other side on the label, and it was about 3.4 kg. So I weighed the box when it got to me. This is why it's still intact with all the packaging and everything still in it, and it was 3.1 kg. Now if you measure the kingpin that is there, you can see that's a decent sized chunk of steel. That weighs about 300 grams. So obviously it was there when the package was sent and weighed. It's been lost somewhere between the UK and here. Customs say it was there when they inspected the thing because everything was there. So I've now got on to New Zealand Post, who delivered it, to see if they know where it's gone. The problem is I can't do anything until that's all sorted out. I don't want to even throw away any of the packaging or anything, and I need to wait until NZ Post come back. I'm sure they're going to say nope, not their fault, not their problem, nothing they can do, in which case hopefully I can then order from the Riley spares just a replacement pin, because this whole kit is about 185 pounds, and obviously I don't need another set of bushers and another spare kingpin and all that kind of extra stuff. So I'm waiting to see what happens there. I have to wait till NZ Post get back to me. I'm pretty sure James at the Riley spares can just send the pin. I don't know how much that'll cost, but what else can I do? Can't do the axle without it. The other thing I've been looking at is gearbox stuff again. So this is my spare gearbox, an old one, and it turns out I don't actually have the right bearing holder, this piece here, which is part of the withdrawal mechanism. So that normally goes on there with the bearing inside there, the big nut on the end to hold it all in place, and then what happens is when you push on the clutch pedal, this pulls up, and that's what pulls up the pressure plate inside here to disengage the clutch. Now this isn't correct. So the gearbox I've got, and this is one of the problems when you're building a special like this, you're mixing and matching parts. So the gearbox I've got is a silent third one. The one on the car is the same as this, and it has these two guide pins. So you can see the arms here. This one's all rusted up. I'm going to degrease it and clean it all up, but you can see these two little arms with these sort of circular bits on them. That's what fits into the little holes in the collar here. So that, if you imagine, goes in there. Now the correct one of these has little ears on it with grooves in it, and that locates on those pins, and so that when the mechanism goes in and out, it's guided by those pins. So what I may be able to do is, now that I've got a mill, I may be able to mill those slots into there. These turn out to be 5/16 pins. I haven't been able to find a reasonably priced 5/16 end mill, but it's close enough to 8mm, so I may be able to get away with that. I'm still thinking about that. The other thing I found is, if we look on here, this is actuated from the top. On mine, the clutch pedal actually attaches to this bottom shaft, which, as you can see, doesn't really do anything. I think these are loose on here. I'm not quite sure. But I did find this bit in all the parts, and I'm pretty sure this is the piece that goes up on here somehow. Because this is a spline shaft, and I think this must go on there. And then when you operate the clutch pedal, there's an arm, and I think this piece rotates here at the top, which is what pushes all this back. So I'm gonna degrease all this, put some mouse milk on it so it all comes ungummed, and then I think that's the way my one is going to work. So on mine, the shaft is much longer, and the clutch and the brake pedal actually sit right on this shaft. So I think that'll work. At this stage, it's just a matter of trying to make what I have work. So we've got all that. I recently went away for Christmas, and just a road trip in the MG up to Napier and then Hamilton. And on the way back, I went to Horopito Motors, which is a very famous scrapyard in New Zealand, in the middle of the country, not far from a volcano which has a ski field on it, or a couple of ski fields. And it's the only real vintage car scrapyard in the country. So I went and had a look around there and rummage about. The place is just amazing. If you ever get to go there and you're into old cars, I mean really old cars, it's just incredible. Just sheds full of stuff. Stuff's obviously been there for decades and never moved. But rummaging around, I did come across these. And these are SU carburetors, obviously. They're 1-inch throat diameter. And I believe these ones are HV type ones, not OM type ones. I haven't quite figured out how you tell which ones are the really vintage ones. I think the flanges for mounting the chamber on the top here are in line with the bore. So on an OM, the screw would be here. I'm not 100% certain on that, and I haven't been able to figure it out from the SU or the Berlin website yet. But I picked these up. They were $60 each, so worth getting. They may be a bit too small for the Riley. As I say, they're only 1 inch, and I think I really need 1 1/8. But these should work to get everything set up and get everything done on the car. So these would mount somewhere on there, like that. I don't know if you'd use this manifold or a different manifold, but at least this will let me set the car up, see how much clearance I've got, because once the steering box is in there, there's not a lot of clearance for the choke mechanism. And if I do find bigger carbs for it later on, they should be similar dimensions, just a bigger throat. So I'm going to clean these up, probably restore them, because even if they're no good for the Riley, they should be good for an Austin 7, for example. So I know there'd be a lot of people who'd be interested in these. One of the problems is the throttle shafts here wear out. It's a bit hard to see, but one of them's not too bad, but this one has a lot of play in it. So I need to look at getting these off and rebushing these, which is a little bit tricky. There are instructions online on how you can do it on the bigger carbs, say the sort of carbs you'd have in the MG. And what you can do is you get what's called a chucking reamer, and you effectively run it backwards. So you need a chucking reamer that's got the right size diameter on the cutting flutes for the hole for the bush you're putting in, and on the shank it has to be the same diameter as the existing bush, so it sort of acts like a pilot. Now I don't know if I can find one of those for these, because these are a smaller shaft. These are a 1/4 inch shaft. So what I am thinking I may be able to do is, once I strip all these down, is I might be able to make some sort of jig that goes in the mill. Now I've got a mill to bolt this to, and then in the mill I could set it up so that there's a guide pin, probably a piece of drill rod or something, silver steel, that's in the collet in the mill, so I can get this perfectly perpendicular to the mill axis, and then all I need to do is get the appropriate reamer and ream these out so I can bush them, and then once that's all done, you sort of line ream it. And I think if I bolt this to a suitable sort of angle plate or a flat plate that can then go in the milling vise, I should be able to do one side, ream that out, flip it over, then do the other side, and then line ream it. And I think that may work. I do need to figure out what bushes I can get to go in there. I'm still sort of thinking about all this. These will be cleaned up and degreased and pulled apart first, of course. It's interesting because these don't actually have a piston. This one's missing its top, but you can buy those new. The weight inside there, the actual piston, these are all a bit sticky, is brass, so it's much heavier than the normal aluminium ones. So they don't actually have the damper in there like the normal ones do, or the later ones do. So that's another little side project. The mill I've got pretty well set up now. I have added the DRO onto it, which makes things far easier. I've never felt the need for one on the lathe, but on the mill it just seems to make everything so much simpler. Now unfortunately the X-axis encoder, which is under there, got broken in shipping, so they're sending a replacement. Inside these encoders, which you can't see because I've got covers on them, is a glass strip that's engraved, and they get broken fairly easily. So it was actually broken at one end, and it worked well enough that I could use it to mill up the brackets to mount everything. And you can't really see how I've mounted things because I've also built these covers that go over the top. The kit that you get comes with various brackets, aluminium brackets, and these covers, but I've ended up not using them. I've made my own just because I wanted a bit more protection. So this is the Z-axis one here, which is operated on an arm that's attached down here. The X-axis is sort of across the back there with its cover, and the Y-axis is there. And all this does is shows you the position very accurately as you use the hand wheels. So that's working very well. I just need the replacement for the X in there, and then I can tidy up all the wiring, which is all just taped together at the moment, and make all this neat. The other thing I did is I made a bigger piece of rubber to go there as a chip guard. It's just to stop stuff falling into the ways and the screw down there. The one that came on it was a little bit small, but this is all set up well and working well. So I'm quite pleased with how that's come out, and I think it's going to be very useful for some of these car things I need to do now. I think that's about it. The other thing I'm going to do is now start on the guards for the Austin. So those ones are kind of my practice prototype ones. I pretty much know how to do it now. I'm just going to go ahead and start cutting out the steel, and I'm going to try and be a lot more careful when I shape it and weld it, just to reduce the amount of hammering that's going to be required. I did start smoothing this one off and then realized it's going to take a lot of work, and I actually also want to extend the back of it here all the way back to the rear wing, just because I think it'll be neater, and then I'm going to reinforce underneath here, probably put a little rubber plate, so that that can be a step, because it's not a huge car, but it's a bit of an effort to climb over the side. So a little step there will just help. Also for just reaching into the car and finding bits and pieces. I think that's about it. The only other thing I got from Horopito Motors, which was quite a lucky find, was a throttle shaft return spring, which is fitted in there. This isn't quite right, but this is an original Austin one, and I just made it sort of work with my setup. So that is the return spring on the throttle shaft, which works very well. So I'll continue with this and then update again later.